Hello, my name is Chris Blask, and welcome to the 40th episode of Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives. And with us today is Jörg Eschweiler. Jörg, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Chris, for having me. Looking forward to chat with you more than 5 minutes.
Right? And where in the world are you right now?
Actually, I'm in Cologne, close to home. Just arrived from a week of travel and facing another week of travel, but it's good. So
It's it.
actually, here it's close to the weekend. It's 6 in the evening.
Yeah, closer than I am. I'm in the Florida intercoastal waterway, near Daytona right now, getting rained on, and talking to you via Starlink, so technology works. And as we were discussing in the green room, right? We this is the 40th conversation we've had. I might have met you through Fred Cohen or whatnot, but I look at the list of the folks that we've had these conversations with, and it amazes me that I get to do this for a living, right? Yeah, we don't get a lot of, we try to keep this, short, don't get into a lot of, background and so forth. But you work with the German military a lot and have for a long time. Folks like Volker Kozak, we live in this world where at our ages and with this much time in the industry, none of us went to school for it. There was no school, right? We learned it, and a lot of you and Volker and Fred and so forth, have started so many things. So it's been fun looking back, right? And Anthony, if you could put that first question up there, right? Looking back, if you're a young person getting into all of this, you do a whole lot of consulting. I've known you through the threat intelligence. Shout out to the Water Ice Act. Just got off a call with those folks. Things are moving all along really well. But in your perspective, how much clarity was there, transparency in business and security? It may have been simpler, maybe it was better back then. What's the path you've been on to here that you've seen?
Well, if I look back when I started, and I mean, the standard protocol was not TCP/IP, but IPX, SPX, or even other protocols, not very well known today anymore. So I'm not even sure if there were lenses for some of the issues that arose over the years. But if we drill it down to the supply chain issue, the world in the high assurance and low assurance field was much less complex because you had a single set of vendors, some local, national, some global. Most of the code was programmed in-house, less libraries and stuff people used and did maybe not know where it came from. Um, and as many things were not networked nor exposed to public networks, there was less attack surface. I mean, of course, those old system highs, whether we called no interfaces, were not really more secure than the others. They just had less attack surface and less exposure. And obviously, every system that does something needs interfaces to other system and to the outside. Otherwise, you're playing with yourself, and that's not leading anywhere. So I think it took some time even before the lenses developed them. I do not want to chase the awareness horse, but actually some years ago that was quite an issue. First, to get people to have awareness of what's going on around them, and that we need lenses, and that of course the lens must not be a static element, but as the world keeps changing, threats are evolving, and even the situation you're in is evolving. You need to constantly clear this lens, adjust it to the right direction, and maybe even focus and refocus it. So I don't think that the lenses at that time were not clear. They were differently. And then when everything started to emerge over that fuzzy internet that didn't go away, I think we had some periods where lenses were not clear, but because of no one intentionally put them out, except some wizards that kept telling people things are not going the right direction. Some of them were right. I mean, you and I know like Fred for a long time and some other folks. Some of the concept issues we're facing now are basically not new. Of course, there are reasons why they couldn't be solved in the beginning, looking back to the Lansons and to the pressure and whatever. So, but I think over time this really improved. So nowadays we have a much more open culture, sharing vulnerabilities, sharing threats, acknowledging things are usually not secure by design. security by obscurity doesn't help either. Not even buys you time, because when you then hit, the problem is even bigger than before. And everyone that spent a few years in incident management and stuff knows that the closer you're out to the fire when it's burning, the more difficult it gets to get something in a controlled way and to recover back to normal. And if we then look at supply chains, I mean, over the last 20 years with cloud services and even hidden globalizations, supply chains are much more complex and dependent now. It's usually, if we just look at software, it's hardly programmed by a continuous team in one place. It's usually composed, partly automated. And I mean, the old garbage in, garbage out principle is still valid, but it scales at wire speed.
And way to run with an analogy. I think at a 40 guess, you definitely get the prize. You worked lens into a lot of that, right? And it makes sense. And I think, in some ways, let me try this analogy: cargo cult, right? The whole cargo cult. For those who are not familiar with that, after World War II, there's a lot of small island nations, that suddenly became air bases, and massive amounts of cargo went through, and it changed everything, right? And as you're saying. And we hear this all the time, particularly in defense industries. If you were, high consequence, but then back in the day, a couple decades ago, you knew where everything came from, right? Now we see it all over the time. U.S. chips and Iranian drones, found on the battlefield in Ukraine and whatnot. And it's, and me with these boats. So much of I love the IoT space because we're taking things off the shelf and plugging them in together. We can do things you could never do. We're not all a DARPA project, right? There's no way you can do most of the things that are fairly if you had to do it yourself, right? So, looking at the present, right? I'll spoil this in my own thoughts on it. I think that the pressure is building. We have to solve it, right? Precision. You touched on this before. There's too much ad hoc in the past. Looking forward, we have to get more precision in it with more information. Otherwise, we can't do anything. So how do you feel about the present? Are we going the right direction? Complicated? Fascinating? What's up?
Well, a bit of all of them. I mean, the thing is with precision, to reach a certain precision, that demands focusing your resources. But as we are focusing as well on a very broad field, I think there is a constant issue from precision versus depth and versus the broadness of the field. So it's pretty hard to apply precision on the one side in order to become effective. But then if you lose track of the others, it doesn't help you if you're precise on one. If we look at like what's in the supply chain and how does it work, I would take the point that we're approaching better and more precision as we also make a clever use of automation. I mean, most of the packet analysis, what's in somewhere, is the software doing what it's supposed to do? Are the APIs as we expect them to be? This can nowadays be cleverly discovered electronically. Parts of it can be even semi-automatically tested or simulated. We do not need that much qualified hands and brains on it anymore in the beginning, but we can repeat it and we can automate parts of it. So yes, we're getting some precision. On the other side, I do not see that we take measures to eliminate some complexity and some risks already at the conceptual level, because the problem is, if you hit it at the technical operational level, you won't be able to kind of compensate what's happened before. I mean, we have this thesis to de-network things. Came from science community. Yeah, bright idea. The problem is if you de-network a network system, it's broke. So we're not doing this for self-purpose, but we must maintain things working. I mean, it was like some years ago when IoT tech got into healthcare, and of course people discovered, ooh, we need to have secured remote access or disable remote access, so no one gets in and manipulates or steals or whatever. On the other side, the more those systems got, the more hospitals or even physicians needed remote support and remote maintenance for that complex systems because they were never trained nor staffed to do it themselves.
And we approach these things in so many little steps. Something you said just reminded me of a memory, early in my career, late 90s, late 80s, Sun workstations, and had this one conversation. I'm young and just trying to figure this stuff out. And it's like, no, that's a terminal connected to this Sun computer, but the terminal has a disk drive and everything else. So it's really a computer. No, it's a terminal. It's a smart terminal, right? De-networking, right?
Yeah.
It's this iterative loop. You say, yes, the workstation is independent, but it's also networked. It's not just, and think about this last question for us today, right? And Anthony, if you roll that one, will we automate trust, right? And some of the conversations I've had today, right, in the ISAC space, we're still 25, 26 years into the Information Sharing Analysis Center, that presidential executive order. And we're still working with trust, inventory, can asset owners tell their ISAC what they have? And is that the way we do it? To your point about the high level, I think we're moving into the place where people know enough about themselves, asset owners, military, or utility or whatnot, to work in trust with the right trusted partners. And I think what we're doing in supply chain is nailing down some of those mechanisms so we can automate these things. Because without that, you're back to ad hoc handwork, and achieving the goal ends up being beyond scope. You don't have the time. Or am I over optimistic? Are we?
Well, from a conceptual point, I'd agree with you. If we would use everything we have in the proper way and make sure it stays current and we scale it, we could get there. But real life shows that things might evolve differently, and they won't even tell you and me. We'll discover afterwards, and it's usually post-mortem. Um, Trust, is a complex thing. Usually trust is something that happens between the ears and behind the eyes and between persons and maybe organizations, but it's hard to scale. And it's complex to establish trust. It's easy to jeopardize trust, and it cannot be repaired like just some kinetic element. What I would go for is to say we can definitely automate transparency, and we can automate certain scale effects that if we did it once or twice and we apply to things we know, that we can get a better depth and do it on more bandwidth, which again leads to more transparency. And we have validated data. Coming back what you said on asset or config data, usually it's not that the asset owner doesn't want to tell you what he has or she, or they are not hiding misconfigurations. They just don't know. They just don't know if what they have is complete. They do not have transparency where it is, what it does. Not because they're bad people or they're not doing their work, but it's just bigger than they can do. And usually when they start to build or scale those systems, they don't have proper measures in place. So what I will think of is we're also facing digital transformation for some of the now called legacy systems, first generation internet network systems in IoT. If we now roll out the third or fourth generation, if we make it to get all those mechanisms in the platforms before, as well as enforce that those systems have some kind of a trust anchor, which is more reliable than a printed MAC address or a SIM code. If you look nowadays, what's the price for like a stump-size smart card or SIM and a certificate on it? It's pennies compared to what you're ending up with if you don't manage it properly. And I would suppose the one thing is rational, people doing it because they think it's useful. The other thing is justifying the cost, because doing proper management and engineering doesn't come for free. It's not because of the extraordinary lifestyle you and I do, but certain things have a price. Good engineers need to be trained, need to be paid, and also need to be kept on track. And I think overall, it's not a budgetary issue, but moving the budgets at the right priorities and keeping them on track, and not maybe being driven by short-term goals. Of course, you can always cut out 10 or 20% cost if you manufacture those devices, but is that really clever? And I think we're facing there, coming back to the automating thing, Also the need to constantly monitor and judge markets and technical developments and become a bit more flexible on regulatory issues. I mean, one thing is if you punish someone for having something done wrong. The other thing, as we discussed like years ago when cyber insurance was the hot thing, was say, well, isn't incentivizing better than punishing? Of course, at the end of the day, you need both. But maybe if we make it to establish a fabric of trust that offers better features, better operating capabilities, and on this way also economical benefits, that could more be a motivation for like critical infrastructure operators and others to lift up to that level. I mean, we had the discussion like when Stix Taxi really came to market to say, okay, if I want to exchange valuable threat intelligence or contextualize it, I need a certain amount of trust. And if I not value that trust, the community will solve itself because they won't play with you or me anymore.
You know, and so right now, so I'm going to come as close to a product plug as I ever have in 40 of these things because I'm putting together the final version of the slides for S4 in 2 weeks, and trying to show how we're moving over time and things you're saying. We have people are doing the right things. We need, we generally are. A trust anchor, something you can really base decisions on. That's so valuable in security and incident response and business, right? How many cycles, how many person hours, how many opportunities lost, to act because we can't get that information quick enough. And we're in so that the message I'm trying to give at S4 is we're at this moment right now where yesterday, I'm going so far as saying, hi, it's 2030. It's 7 years from now. People are doing the right things. Let's talk about the results of that. Let's stop debating, where we're going and say right now in 2020, remember back in 2023, 7 years ago, a file explorer, you remember Windows 2 file explorer? That changed everything. Now, back in the day, we could all cat grep the ls, pipe it to the thing and do it all by hand. But just to be able to stop and see, to buy that time, so you're not searching for things and then drilling in and saying, pop up, here's the threat intelligence or the supply chain intelligence you're looking for, provenance, click, there it is. And it's not really rocket science, and Dmitry Raymond, our CTO co-founder, the engineering team, they're fantastic folks, but that's not so much the point right now. Now's the time. You couldn't do it 5 years ago. Most people aren't doing it now. If you're not doing it in 5 years, if you're still searching for things by hand, then how can you automate anything?
Yeah, and I think it's also a thing making it digestible for the humans that are operating it and that are handling it. I mean, having a bit of background in the military environment, we've been used there for years to have complex common operational pictures, systems, geo information fused even between domains, and then finding a way to make that digestible in a short time for a person sitting in front of it that's not necessarily an expert in all domains and everything that's going on, but has to take decisions at a certain point. And I would say as long as I don't manage it to make it digestible for the, let's say, not that talented human, I won't be able to automate it for the stupid machine. And
that's a goal.
If we look then also at emerging hybrid scenarios, I mean, it's not necessarily everything a state's actor trying to spy on you or to destroy you. It could also be just bad luck that things happen in bad situations. But we definitely need to be able to get a clue on that closer and shorter. And if you look at like the folks sitting at a cyber defense center or running a CERT, there are of course no information warfare or cognitive warfare operationals, and if your job is to like run oil pump or electronic power plants, you do not have the background information what's going on in the skies and somewhere, but we have to find a way to enable the quick contextualization. I mean, how many like bad cyber attacks we've seen in the last year, at the end of the day it was simple ransom, and it moved in over little vulnerabilities, very well exploited, but it was not the bad nation A or B with their highly weaponized services trying to go in somewhere. It was basic digitally burglary, and by coincidence, it destroyed a power plant. not really intending it, just not knowing what they're doing, and one thing came to the other, and we need a certain fail-proof and resiliency measure in this as well. And coming back to like things like SBOM, I mean, I need to be able to constantly validate during runtime, is this information still current? Maybe you're telling me this is packet X from library Epsilon, and when you tested it was the case, but it might not be still valid when it got shipped over to me, or even someone pulled your leg in the supply chain. So that's the risk. I mean, if we automate trust and trust anchors, we still need continuous validation.
Right. And I got to thank you for this conversation. You honestly have been, not surprised. More useful information per minute. And I can't parse it out fast enough to comment on too much of it, right? But I'll, since I gave one Cybeats plug, I had to put this one out there as well. From the agent side and got into SBOM and so forth because you need that structure to be able to do what you're talking about. I think this is one of the sort of next ways we get supply chain intelligence, SBOMs, and Vexit and so forth out in the world. And people are saying this already. Now, tell me exactly what all of my 10,000 insulin pumps, are doing right now, and is that still true? And I think that all plugs together, and you can see it coming over, this decade. I think a lot of that will play out. So thank you anyways. We're kind of at time right now. Thanks for everybody out in the world listening to this. Thanks for all you do to make the world a better place, and for all the mustard.
You are welcome, my friend. Looking forward to see you in the US or Europe as soon as possible and have a real beer in the real world.
Real world RSA. You coming to RSA again this year? We will absolutely see you there. Thank you, Jörg. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Anthony.
Take care, guys. Stay safe.